and we're now being joined by Spencer Critchley, who is a journalist and author. He's joining us from California. Mr. Critchley, how do you see this victory of Mamdani, despite so many statements which were given against him by the US President himself, US President backing his competitor? But despite all the odds, Mamdani has emerged as the winner. How do you see this victory?
Well, in general, I think it's good news. Mamdani represents a new kind of energy, a new kind of authenticity, and a new kind of inclusiveness that's important to the future of a Democratic Party that has seen many of its older leaders become increasingly out of touch with today's voters, which has been a serious problem. And I think that was nowhere more evident than in so many members of the Democratic establishment backing Andrew Cuomo, who's just an almost perfectly inappropriate choice, I think, as a mainstream candidate. At the same time, though, it also really brings to the fore a fundamental tension within the Democratic coalition. And I think it's one that's very poorly understood by many Democrats, including many of Mr. Mamdani's supporters. And that's, his membership in the Democratic Socialists of America. This is an organization that is fundamentally incompatible with the Democratic Party on very important issues. And of course, in a liberal democracy, people are perfectly free to be members of the DSA. It's just that if they're also members of the Democratic Party, they're trying to bridge a gap that's not really bridgeable. I think we've seen Mamdani trying to bridge that gap and doing about as good a job as can be done. Before him, we've seen Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez do the same thing. She's also a member of the DSA, although she has distanced herself from them following their, in many cases, pro-Hamas statements after the October 7th attack on Israel. But that tension, I think, is very real. And I know that many Democrats just want to celebrate tonight and will consider this kind of comment that I'm making right now to be a case of being something of a wet blanket. But I think realism requires us to celebrate this evening, but recognize that the way ahead, I think, requires Democrats seeing that while it's good to overthrow a somewhat ossified old guard where that's been necessary, and it's good to have new energy in the party and a voice that represents more of the young people's views, it's also going to be important to make sure that Democrats do know what they stand for and are able to stand for that coherently.
Absolutely. Mr. Critchley, also help us understand, what do you think, according to you, were the issues and the promises that really resonated with the New Yorkers, and what really did not work out for Cuomo, who you called was an inappropriate choice for the New York mayor?
Well, I think with Mamdani, there were a couple of things. One of them is the new subjective version of politics where so much depends on personality, not a list of objective facts, rational arguments and policy points, but a sense of projecting the sense of personality that people respond to subjectively. In some ways, that's a welcome sign in that it introduces more humanism to politics. On the other hand, it can be risky when people win elections just on the way they feel and where people haven't looked too closely at their policies. But Mr. Mamdani is undeniably talented as a politician and is very good at making that authentic personal connection, which I think many voters responded to. They just liked him, which is why, frankly, many people supported Barack Obama, who I also thought was a very substantial candidate at the same time. Then when it does come to policy, the fact that Mamdani was very disciplined in focusing on affordability in New York City really got to the heart of the matter for a great many New York voters, not just young ones, not just left-leaning ones, but probably a great many, not only in the mainstream, but others who might otherwise support somebody like a Donald Trump. Because similarly to Trump, Mamdani was promising to attack some of the most important issues in their day-to-day lives, like the price of rent, the price of food, the unavailability of health care. These are crucial concerns for everyday people in New York, and I think that was very smart from a policy point of view. The difference there between him and Trump would be that Trump is a congenital liar who was just saying those things to get elected and does not care at all about the plight of working people. Mamdani, whether or not his policies are realistic, I believe is sincere in caring about working people.
All right, Mr. Spencer Critchley, you mentioned about Donald Trump. So this victory hasn't really gone down well with US President Donald Trump, and it is on the expected lines. And in fact, now Donald Trump has cited the US government shutdown as a reason for Mamdani's victory and Republicans' loss.
Yes, well, this is typical of Trump. He also claimed it's because he personally was not on the ballot, because in the universe in which Donald Trump lives, which is ruled by him and essentially consists only of what he likes and does not like, everything is about Donald Trump. I think Mamdani won for the reasons I just suggested and perhaps others. But I don't think the presence of Trump on the ballot in New York City would have made a difference. And in fact, I think Trump's endorsement of Cuomo at the last minute was probably toxic in New York City, where Trump is by and large deeply unpopular.
So, Mr. Critchley, what according to you is going to be the biggest challenge for Zohran Mamdani, as we already saw Donald Trump issuing threats and warnings to the New Yorkers that if they elect Mamdani as their mayor, there would be federal fund cuts?
Yes, this is another indication of how in Trump's world, nothing matters except Trump. If he did actually stand for ordinary Americans the way he so often claims, he would never make such a threat, because, of course, the only people who will be hurt would be the ordinary residents of New York City. And he, of course, is perfectly willing to sacrifice them to the needs of his own ego. I think the biggest challenge that Mamdani is going to face going forward is fulfilling his promises, which were very bold and quite likely unattainable by a mayor of New York. Promising government-owned grocery stores, a rent freeze. This is not only difficult to achieve, but there are almost no economists who think it's a good idea. Of course, many people think it's very important to make rents affordable for regular working people, which they very much are not in New York City. The trouble is that a rent freeze is almost universally seen by economists and has been found in practical experience to be counterproductive, because if you freeze the rents, you reduce the housing supply, which ends up driving rents higher overall. There are other solutions to making rents affordable, but I don't think a rent freeze is one of them. But making promises like government-run grocery stores, which I think similarly unrealistically would somehow reduce the price of groceries consistently going forward, and some of his other policies, I think he's going to have a very hard time following through on those promises. And I think as he does have that trouble, I think some of the glow might come off. So he's going to have to negotiate the potential disappointment that may be waiting for his voters.
All right, Mr. Spencer Critchley, thank you so much for joining us on India Today. So those were some of the challenges mentioned by the journalist that Mamdani could face.